Hey, let's talk about some of the favorite books we read during the last school year. Hi, I am Rachel from 7 and All, and if you're new to this channel, I am a second-generation homeschooler, now raising 2 young sons, but I was homeschooled myself, and I have come by a natural love of books my whole entire life, and it's probably no surprise that I use a very heavy literature base to my homeschool today. This is going to be part of a collab hosted by Katie from Life in the Mundane. So I'm just gathering with several of my YouTube homeschool friends here, and we're going to be chatting about some of the books that we read this year and the ones that really stood out. Now this is supposed to be favorite read-alouds. My kids are still rather young. We're just barely dipping our toes into the world of chapter books, still mostly in the picture book world. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old right now, and we love picture books, so just so you know, these aren't going to be the typical like chapter book read-alouds so much. These are going to be more aimed at younger kids. If you want some of my recommendations for older kids, I'll link to my website down below where I have literature guides. Every literature guide that I produced is for a book that I think is well worth reading, and those are aimed at much older kids, upper elementary and beyond. All right, let's start with our favorite books we read this year. This is part of Sunlight Tea, Nana Upstairs and Nana Downstairs. This is actually a book that I cannot read without crying. Let me know in the comments, are you a crier? When it comes to doing read-alouds, I am already prone to that, and this is one where it's like I have read it dozens of times. I cannot read it without crying. My sons do request this book. They have quite an attachment to it. This is actually my husband's favorite picture book to read aloud. He is always happy to read this one aloud, so this is one that maybe sometimes I kind of pass on to him because he will not cry when he reads it out loud. But this is a classic, so you might be already very familiar with it, but it's a boy, his grandma, and his great-grandma, and he does experience his great-grandma passing away during the story, which brings back a lot of memories for me. And it's a good one for kids to think through the love and the loss when it comes to elderly family members. This is a bigger book that we read through this year, Little Pilgrims' Big Journey. We were supposed to, in our Gentle and Classical Primer, spend a couple weeks going through some junior version of Pilgrim's Progress. There were a couple different ones recommended. This is the one that I ended up picking out, Little Pilgrim's Big Journey. They have lots of illustrations, not an excessive amount of words on a page, so it was a very good level for my boys. They have chapter summaries at the end of each chapter. This was very engaging to my boys. The request for can we read just one more chapter was a very normal experience with this. They were highly engaged in the journey, in the story and the adventure, and I do think some elements of the allegory still do go over their heads. They're very young, but they did understand quite a bit of it and did engage with this very well. Now, I have read Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, but it's been more than 15 years, so I can't say from my own experience exactly how close this follows the original book, so I don't have an opinion on that, but this was very good, and it generally went along with what I remember, but it has been a while for myself since I've read the original. This was another book from Sunlight Tea. Sunlight Tea was a real win this year. They've just got so many great books in Sunlight Tea. This is gigantic. I'm having to use some of my muscles to hold this one up right now. But this is a treasury of picture book classics. Sunlight sometimes uses picture book treasuries because they can be a little bit more affordable, an affordable way to get a lot of picture books. This one has 12. You can kind of see what they are by the pictures on the sides there. And they're mostly very much classics. Caps for Sale, Goodnight Moon, Harold and the Purple Crayon. That's a very big favorite in our house. But what I like about this specific treasury is that they don't combine multiple pages as they do in some treasuries, but they give you the full page experience of reading the picture book, which I think sometimes when you condense picture books to put them in treasuries, you end up really missing out on some of the experience, but this hefty book has all, every page of every story. It's just like reading the original picture book, except it's just a really heavy book. But this book has stood the test of time. My mom first bought this copy from Sunlight Tea for my sister, who's now in 11th grade. So we have gotten our use out of that. That has been read dozens, if not hundreds of times over the years to many children. This was another big win from Sunlight Tea once more. This is the Virginia Lee Burton Treasury. It includes 4 books by Virginia Lee Burton. There's the Mike Mulligan story. There's The Little House. That one also tends to make me cry. There is Katie and the Big Snow and Maybelle the Cable Car. So it's very machinery oriented. My boys love machinery oriented stories, but they're also stories with heart and a little bit of history always involved, and kind of changing times, changing history, hard work, faithfulness. They are great stories with very interesting illustrations. Here we've got Katie digging her way out after the big snowfall, digging the town out. Beautiful book. This was one of our Spanish favorites of the year, Aloro, Tico, Tango. This is also available in English as well. And there's also a song that you can find on the internet that has been made for this book that just sings the book basically. But it's a story of in the rainforest, there's this macaw, Tico Tango, and he keeps stealing fruit from all these animals. He sees an animal with a yummy looking fruit and he steals it. And he does it again and again, and basically, as you might expect, he ends up stealing too much fruit. He ends up dropping it all, and all the animals get their fruit back, and in the end, they decide to share it with him if he apologizes. It's a silly book. It's very repetitive, which is great when we're practicing a minority language. It's colorful, it's funny, very memorable for my sons. My son now actually tends to refer to any macaw he sees as Tico Tango. Look, it's Tico Tango. So that was a really fun one, and one that has stuck with us. Now, I mentioned we haven't done much with chapter books yet, but one chapter book series that we've introduced and read through this year is The Lighthouse Family by Cynthia Rylant. So we've got a whole bunch of them right here. These are very short, very good, I think, beginner chapter books, because there's a lot of pictures. They are just black and white, but there's pictures on every page, I think. And they're very short chapters and overall short books, maybe 4 to 6 chapters per book. But these were scheduled as part of our Gentle and Classical Nature Volume 2 as the read aloud option. And they follow a little family that kind of becomes a family accidentally of a cat, a dog, and 3 little mice children. And the first book gets into the whole story of how they become a family, and then different friends that they meet, different sea creatures that they meet and that they end up helping. Very sweet. They were definitely very engaging for my sons, who already have a lot of interest in sea animals. So books that were featuring whales and octopuses and otters were kind of automatically going to be a win, but it was fun to actually, like, 'cause this is kind of our first series experience of following the same characters from one book to another, and actually reading through 6 books in a series. So that was like cool to have that first experience with a series, and very memorable. Definitely recommend these. Oh, by the way, where do I get most of my books? Just like all the cool homeschool moms do, thrift books. I'll leave my referral link down below. If you've never used them, you should definitely be using them, because if you're using a curriculum like Gentle and Classical, they're going to have a lot of great book recommendations, and you're going to want to find those books somewhere. You're probably not going to want to pay full price. I've been able to find so many of the recommended books or needed books for school on thrift books for a fraction of the full price, and that really helps with a homeschool that loves a lot of books. So highly recommend looking on thrift books. Sometimes they don't have what you're looking for, but a lot of times they do. It's worth checking out. This is a book from Sunlight P that we also did this year. We loved Sunlight P's science books in particular. And this was probably our favorite. I've talked about it multiple times. It's a big book, took us a while to get through. The Big Book of Science and Nature from the Bernstein Bears. Basically, this book incorporates pretty much all basic natural science information that a young child could possibly need to know. It is rich, it rhymes. It has the Bernstein Bears. There's funny situations going on with Papa Bear, of course. There's a lot. So they have facts about animals. They go through different major types, you know, what makes something an animal. They go through what characteristics of plants, characteristics of mammals, amphibians. We even get into like states of matter, simple machines. So this has a lot. For other favorite science reads, we love this series, the Over and Under, or Here, Up in the Garden and Down in the Dirt series from Kate Mesner. We have enjoyed these books a lot. We've read them many times. They're just so lyrical, beautiful, simple as far as the text goes. Let me show you here. There's not a lot of text to read on a page, and it uses all those literary devices that just makes reading it aloud so fun. But then at the very back of the book, this is cool, and my boys can get lost here or try to make me read everything. They will go through all of the creatures and plants, anything kind of highlighted and featured in the story. Then they'll have nonfiction information on all of those in the back of the book. So you get both kind of that story, poetic story experience, but then you also get the nonfiction info, which I think is a great blend. Then we also incorporate picture books for math learning. I looked at Kate Snow's picture book recommendations that she has on her blog for kindergarten and first grade and second grade math with confidence, and I purchased several of those. Here are a few that really stood out this year, which this one, like regardless of whether you're doing it for math, kids who love trucks are gonna love this book. It's 20 Big Trucks in the Middle of the Street. This is a huge win. I have literally read this dozens of times. There's a ice cream truck that breaks down in this boy's neighborhood, and then it just so happens that all these other trucks end up getting stuck behind the ice cream truck. And they're pretty specific with quite a variety of different trucks and naming what each truck is for, which is super fascinating for kids who love trucks. It's a great book, and we've enjoyed reading that one many times. This one was kind of a surprise hit for me, The Action of Subtraction. And this one was recommended, but we've read this many, many times at my son's request because this is one that he just tends to pull out for fun. I think the illustrations are one of the really appealing features. They are very humorous, creative, silly. Here you see we're subtracting trees because a beaver is running away with one of the trees. But it's got a rhyming text. I would recommend stopping. Don't just like read through this really quickly, but stopping and kind of like talking about the different situations where subtraction is happening to kind of talk through those situations with your kids if you're really working on learning subtraction, as we were this year. And the last math book I'm going to share is 100 Snowmen, which as you go through the book, there's a bunch of snowmen doing different things, but there's always an equation with 3 snowmen counting the stars at night and 4 having a snowball fight. There's different quantities of snowmen doing different things, and you're adding them all up as you go. But I think just the snowman theme made this really appealing. I think pretty much snowmen have universal appeal, but my kids have never seen snow. They're tropical babies, so I do think that snowmen are just something really magical and mystical. It's a life goal for them to build a snowman someday. I have no idea if that's gonna happen. We'll see. But those are some of our really highlights from the books that we read this year. We read a lot of books, but I limited it to these. Definitely make sure that you check out the playlist linked in the description below for the rest of the collab videos, and head to Katie's channel, Life in the Mundane, next. I'll be seeing you next time. Bye.